The poem of the mind in the act of finding what will suffice. It has not always had to find. The scene was set. It repeated what was in the script. Then the theater was changed to something else. Its past was a souvenir. It has to be living to learn the speech of the place. It has to face the men of the time and to meet the women of the time. It has to think about war, and it has to find what will suffice. It has to construct a new stage. It has to be on that stage and, like an insatiable actor, slowly and with meditation, speak words that in the ear, in the delicate ear of the mind, repeat exactly that which it wants to hear, at the sound of which an invisible audience listens, not to the play, but to itself, expressed in an emotion as of two people, as of two emotions becoming one. The actor is a metaphysician in the dark, twanging an instrument, twanging a wire string that gives sounds passing through sudden rightnesses, wholly containing the mind, below which it cannot descend, beyond which it has no will to rise. It must be the finding of a satisfaction, and may be of a man skating, a woman dancing, a woman combing, the poem of the act of the mind. Of modern poetry, a poem by Wallace Stevens, which was published in 1942 as part of his book, Parts of a World. Good evening. Welcome to Philly Loves Poetry. My name is Charles Carr, and the focus of our program is to give our audience the experience of the rich culture of poetry in Philadelphia and the surrounding community. Philly Loves Poetry is a product of a collaboration between the Moonstone Arts Center of Philadelphia and Philly Camp. So tonight we have a great guest, an honored guest, and someone who I've known and admired for quite some time, John Timpane. John was a professor and lecturer in English, first at Rutgers University and later at Lafayette College. In 1997, the Philadelphia Inquirer hired him as an opinion page editor and later books editor and theater critic. John retired from the Inquirer in 2019. Since then, John has freelanced full-time. He specializes in ghostwriting autobiographies, arts reviewing, especially in poetry and theater, and conducting writing seminars. John keeps working at the craft of verse, as in his chapbooks Burning Bush, which was published by Windsor, Ontario, Cranberry Tree, and Buck in the Piano Room, published by Moonstone in 2023. John's latest book, which we will be discussing tonight, with the Poetry Center at San Francisco State and with Mariana Watts, is Poetry for Dummies, which was published just this year by Wiley Press. So, good evening, John, and welcome.
Good evening, Charles.
Sorry, my voice is breaking up a little bit, but you know, as I said to you as we were sitting outside, I kind of took umbrage with the title of the book, because after reading the whole thing and rereading certain sections of it, it is so comprehensive, is so far-reaching in scope, and we'll discuss that, that I think the title kind of undersells how magnificent this book is. Not only for, you know, a person might say, geez, I never get poetry, but also to poets and other artists The discipline at the end that you talk about, I think, is really fantastic. So, can you talk about that the struggle with that title?
Well, the Dummies series is a very familiar brand.
Right.
When I mention that I'm one of the authors of Poetry for Dummies, everybody knows the Dummies books, and they've sold, I think, more than 40 million books out there in various subjects. And the whole thing about the Dummies title is that it's rather ironic because it's trying to tell you you're not a dummy. You have entree into what your interests are. Maybe you were interested in wine, or in German, or in AI, or in home repair, or for goodness sakes, crocheting, or poetry. All of these things are waiting for you if you want entree to them. You don't need permission, and that's sort of what the Dummies books sets out to let people know: is you can have access to these things that you've always wanted to know more about. Why hesitate? Now, it's true. It can give the wrong impression, having titled Poetry for Dummies, because several of the Dummies books, and I have several of them now, being in the Dummies stable, and I love the Opera for Dummies books actually, and the Wine for Dummies is very good. It's a very good introduction, very intelligent, and I am told, I don't know myself, but I'm told that the introductions to the various computer languages are quite good. And indeed, I think the biggest Dummies book of all time, this will show you how long ago it was, is in 1995, DOS for Dummies sold something like 5 million copies, because it gave, a lot of us needed to know how to do DOS in the old days, especially if you had something like WordStar. Let's see if anybody remembers that, which is a very old, when one of the first big word editing programs. And the thing about WordStar was, it was based on DOS, and you could go in and you could make your own little tweaks. You could actually go ahead and hack it. It was the first experience many of us had in changing our programs. So with Poetry for Dummies, I got the same thing that you're talking about from none other than Lawrence Ferlinghetti. I was trying to finish this book, and about 11 o'clock at night, and my wife and the kids were in bed, and and suddenly the phone rings, and I grab it so that it doesn't wake everybody up. Hello, John. This is Lawrence Ferlinghetti, very famous beat poet, who I've read my whole life with. I really like a lot of what he has written. By the way, I always recommend to people you should read the poem "Dog" by Lawrence Ferlinghetti, D-O-G. Just find it online. It is simply delightful, all American, wide open. One of these great poems that gives you the sense of life. Anyway, he says, John, I'm not going to write the introduction to your book. Now, no one had told me that he'd even been asked. This is out of the effing blue. I'm telling you, this guy calls me and says he's apologizing because he's not going to write the introduction. And he says, the reason I won't write the introduction is that I just can't be associated with a book that has both poetry and dummies in the title. But he went on to say, as you're saying, that it turns out that he liked the book a lot. He says, it was a lot smarter than I expected. And now, that's a left-handed compliment, but at least it's nice to know that people were pleasantly surprised. and he says, and it's actually trying to demystify something that never should have been mystified in the first place, which is what he said. He did write us a blurb, which we still use at the front of the book. And I treasure that. I treasure that blurb. And I treasure the fact that he had such a fairness of mind to go ahead and help me a little bit, even if he couldn't write the intro.
Right. Well, that's pretty heady stuff with Lawrence Ferlinghetti. He's one of my favorite. So Dog is one, but Baseball Canto is also
so
one of my favorites.
So good.
But could you just give us kind of a flyover of this book? Because reason I say this, I think some people would approach it as, oh, well, somebody's going to teach me how to read a poem. But there's so much more in there. There's this amazing history and development of the art form. I mean, from through the ages. And so people can follow that. And there's so much poetry that is poems that are in the body of the book that are, you hold their hand and help them understand. And there were one you even go through with, and she's one of my favorite all-time poets, is Hayden Saunier, where you actually go through an editing job.
Oh.
And how she, sliced this and sliced that to understand this is a process.
Well, Hayden's she's such a treasure, and she's Philly has so many really, really fine poets, and she's certainly right there among them. And I called her and I said, what I'd like to do is I'd like you to give me the first draft of a poem, and then what you did in the second draft,
Right.
and I'll publish both. Or actually, what the final draft was. And I'll publish both, but I'd like you to explain the process that led you from one to the other. What were your choices? Why did you make them?
Right.
And she's a very conscientious poet. And I thought to myself, that'll teach folks a lot. That'll show folks a lot what this is, this art, this craft, where really you make your own rules as you go along, and you learn what needs to be fixed by writing. That's how you learn. That's how you're led to the parts of the poem that maybe will start bugging you as you walk down the street weeks and weeks later and go, oh, I've got to change that.
Yeah.
That's part of the process too, the involuntary memory that surfaces and says, oh, you've been thinking about it, and you realize, oh, I'm thinking about it a lot because it isn't right. And everyone who writes poetry knows what I'm talking about. And Hayden
Right.
was really good at being able to talk about her process. So we start by giving a definition of poetry. And the kinds of definitions that I do in this book, I regard them as something that I call diplomatic definitions. They're not meant to be, see here, they're meant to be definitions that that open it up for further discussion and negotiation. Thereby, that's why I call them diplomatic. So I just say that poetry is an art form in which the material is language and all the appurtenances thereunto. So all the things that relate to language, how language suggests things without having to say them. So the power of metaphor, and similarly, how language has sound and rhythm, but also the world of language, the way that language makes us human. There's a certain investment that we have in poetry because we have an investment in language because it's what makes us human. I'm not comparing poetry to any of the other arts because all of them are sort of like that. Think of music, for example. Music is, again, something that we have a big investment in, and it's just like with poetry, there's sort of a mysterious magic to that. Somehow music has our number, right? So with poetry, it's the same thing. So I'm just saying it's a artwork that has language as its material, and then I just very gently look at how do you want to go at this? How do you want to approach poetry? So I thought the first thing would be to talk about how to read aloud. That reading aloud, although it sounds to some people like something you do in school, but reading aloud makes poetry live. And poetry wants to be read aloud. It wants to be in a body. It wants to be enacted. And I think that once you get a taste for that, there's no going back.
Yeah.
Once you understand how that locks in, you will always. I know you're like this, and I'm sure many of our viewers are like this too. That once you see a poem, you immediately want to read it aloud to yourself. You want to hear what that's like.
Exactly.
Because certainly poetry has a life on the page. because it gets your mind going. It gives you those pictures, and it makes you think, and it makes you live a little bit sharper. But once you read a poem aloud, I'll give a good example, actually, since I'm talking. This is from a silly book that I wrote in 1995. It's called It Could Be Verse, not my title. But this was the book that led somebody to call me up and say, would you like to write poetry for dummies? This is the book. They saw this. So this is called The Word Plum. It's by a poet named Helen Chapin. And this sort of, it's an open form verse poem, but you'd never say that it was prose. There's something about it that just, you'll feel the crackle, you'll hear the music, and you'll realize, oh yeah, that's poetry. It's called The Word Plum. The word plum is delicious. Pout and push, luxury of self-love and savoring murmur, full in the mouth and falling like fruit. Taut skin, pierced, bitten, provoked into juice, and tart flesh, question and reply, lip and tongue of pleasure.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yes, and many people feel, I don't know why they would feel this, that it's not altogether not a naughty poem.
Okay.
But if you think about it, the P, L, U, and M, all of them are scattered throughout the poem, and they're all run through the language, so that poem is the word plum in a very real sense. Right. It's not about the word plum. It embodies the word plum, and the word embodies the poem. And by using the sounds, we get into the connection with pleasure, the connection with things like taste and smell, and the connection with things like desire, which is certainly in there delightfully. Yeah. And if you read it aloud, suddenly you're there. Suddenly you're there in the middle of what poetry is about. You don't need to know the rules. You don't need to know there are any rules.
So there's so many aspects of this book, but one particular, there are three words that kept repeating in my mind. And when you were talking about organizing a strategy to read a poem, and that was exploration, speculation, and research. And that last piece, research, I'm looking at it from the writer's side. I recently had a poem I wrote, and it was about the migrant workers that cultivate and harvest mushrooms. I said, well, I know nothing really deeply about the life of mushrooms or about the organization of labor to produce a mushroom. So therefore, I had to do my research.
Yeah.
And so that's from my side. But I always feel when I read a poem that's giving me something where I have to dig a little deeper. But I love that part of the book that you're actually giving a strategy to a reader. You know, that process that you set up on page, I think it's 69.
Yeah.
And it's a 3-step process. Can you just tell us about that? I think it's tremendous.
So I chose the word exploration because, at least in the beginning, the way you go at a poem should be really without rules, that you go into the poem and you try to be with it. You don't try to solve it. If it sounds difficult or you don't quite know what it's doing, hang on a little bit, try to understand. Like, I think the one that I just read, the word plum, you're into it instantly. That's a very easy access poem, but many poems are not. But the idea is to explore, is to be willing, as Keats once said, to be in the middle of doubts and perplexities without an irritable reaching after certainty and closure. Instead, just let the doubts and perplexities be there. Explore, go through the poem, find different parts that call to you, find parts that you find difficult. And then the second part which it is, I think, the gold is this is all part of getting to the point where you can interpret a poem. And interpretation is so important. And here's another diplomatic definition. To interpret a poem is to account for the feelings that the poem gives you. So, for example, let's say after reading a poem and feeling that maybe you've gotten it, now you have to sit down and say, well, I have this feeling. What in the poem led me to those feelings? Now, I'm not asking you to write that, but that's what interpretation is trying to explain, going back and forth with the poem. It did this and it did this. And then that the thing about research, the thing is, these are steps, Charles, but they're also sort of imbricated on one another. They, in other words, you keep going back, 1, 3, 2, 3, 2, 1. So you might start researching a word that you don't know. And I do. I have a long list of words that I don't know, that I thought, and when they really, what's one that I just learned? Well, spider cam. So the spider cam is that little sort of drone camera that's suspended above a field of play, and it goes back. Right. It's on an axis, right. So it can go up and down the field, and you get some amazing angles which we never saw before, right. On television, and that's being used a lot in World Cup photography. And I thought, spider cam, that's really interesting because there sort of is a netting, right, and it sort of moves like a spider moves along the netting. So and so that is exploration too. I remember when I was a teacher, the first thing I wanted to say to my students is, if you have a question, go find the answer. If you see a word you don't know, don't keep going. Just find out what the word means.
Right.
Because once we learn something, we have changed, and the universe has changed. Because once you change, the universe has changed because you are in that universe, and it is in you. Yeah. So, and I think, and it helps you get to know a poem. So, yeah. And then that's why research is, to me, and it's not just because I'm an old journalist on top of everything else, but I guess it's because it was always second nature for me when I was a little kid to look stuff up,
Well, the other word of that trilogy I mentioned was speculation. Now, I've never used the word speculation in trying to say, this is my speculation on this poem.
Yes.
And,
yes.
You speak, I think of, you speculate about a cause.
Yes.
You speculate about behavior. And, of course, there's speculation in the financial industry.
Right.
But I thought it was really exciting that you used that term in this book. And in a couple of the subsections, you have speculation again.
Yes.
So can you talk about that?
Absolutely. So speculation is guessing. It's just educated guessing. And it's guessing. The reason speculation, I think, is crucial is it's open-ended. It's not saying this is true. It's saying this might be true. Let's test it. A speculum, right? It's sort of the magnifying glass. Let's look at it. Let's test it. And so we're always in poetry. Yeah, there's a lot that's true. There's facts you can say about poems. Hamlet. It is not true that Hamlet was written about 1957 Brooklyn, but truths like that tend to be banal, like that one is. That's a useless fact. Yes, of course not. But speculation, on the other hand, is what's really cool, because you're bringing up ideas, and you don't know if they're true or not true about the poem, but you feel like they've got a chance at being true. And I give several levels of speculation, right? Like longing look speculation, looking under the hood speculation. And these are just metaphors for different kinds. Like some speculation is at first, the kind of guesses that you make when you first come to a poem. But then there's more where you start working more in the poem, reading it again and again, getting, taking the parts, taking the bits apart, listening to the music, like in the word plum, and realizing that the music is chosen, first of all, to make you smile because it is a humorous poem. Secondly, to make you one terminal hedonist, and so some poems you're already speculating. Say, so why is that there? Why is that music there? It's making me feel a certain way. And if we want to do that, we could take that all the way through the poem. And it's longer and it's harder work.
Yeah.
But that's why I say I think that's speculation. It's a constant process of making guesses about where my feelings come from, what the poem, how the poem is engaging me. Even when a lot of poems don't make definite statements, but they do create an atmosphere in which, in your heart and mind, you think about things. Right?
Yeah.
So that's why speculation works.
I on top of that, or
Please.
fused with that, when chapter 5, the title is The Art of Interpretation. And I walked away from that and I said, that's really great, because the way I read it is, you are a part of art right now. You are part of that piece of art.
Yes.
Once a poem is written and published, it's no longer yours. It's out there in the world, and people now can become a part of it. And I really like. I walked, left that chapter saying, to tell people you're going to be a part of a piece of art when you read a poem, and it's like art. There's much individuality in what you bring to it.
Absolutely.
This isn't a mechanical process. Bing, 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 bing. Like a recipe for cooking, but everybody makes soup differently. But
It'll taste different with each person. Yes.
Exactly. But I very much love that you use that art of interpretation rather than saying interpreting poems.
Well,
Excuse me.
I think the one I wanted somehow to grasp what I've always been doing and what you've always been doing and what people who love poetry always do. They don't think about that. They don't put words on. They don't put names to it or labels. But this is a way, at least, to think fruitfully about how we approach a poem, right? Mm-hmm. And after this section, we're going to get to the history, which starts with Enheduanna with the Sumerians 5,500 years ago. 5,500 years ago. It's amazing that we can even talk about things. I mean, it's because that's as long as we've had history.
Right.
And it ends with poems that were written this year. And one of the reasons I wanted to write it the way I wrote it was to say there's a continuity there, that there's an engagement of the human mind and heart and soul and whatever else you want to call it with the world and with the universe, and that never changes. That starts from the very beginning, and asking questions and using music, and all of that is there from the beginning. But there's also changes. There's trends. There's I like to say that people like T.S. Eliot found a new way to write, because great poets do. They discover a voice they can have. They discover a field they can till. And we were talking about Wallace Stevens. What an inimitable voice he has. No one writes quite like him. He can be playful. He can be pompous. He's got a lot of different aspects to him, but you'll never mistake him for somebody else.
What can we do? Because once you say you're a poet to some people, let's say you're at a cocktail party.
Oh boy, I've been here.
Charles, what do you do? So, I'm retired and I'm a poet. And you go, all right. And they say, you hear, I don't say 9 out of 10, but a lot. I don't get poetry. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what can we do to make poetry more accessible? Or should we say, no, that's not our job?
Well, I mean, if a person you know asks you, you know, I mean, now some people get pretty aggressive about it and say, you
Right.
know, I don't think you could ever, you know, it's sort of knock the chip off my shoulder, you know, kind of
Right.
thing. Those folks, I always say, well, I understand that. I understand it. There's things out there that I don't get either, and I'll never connect with it. I just won't. Um, and but I'll always tell them. But I also think that there's probably something in it for you. If you want to look at it that way, it's that you probably can find something in poetry that connects with your life, your experiences, your feelings. It's such a big world, such a rich world. You were talking about how much is in the book. Well, it's such a rich world, you know. What can we do when people say, I don't get it? Well, what we just did, I think, is I've done that. I'm sure you've done it. You know, you choose a poem, somebody reads it, have a conversation about it. You know, you say, "Well, you said this about that. Can you show me where you got that feeling?" You know, just to get them to go back and play with the language a little bit and say, "Oh yeah, okay, yeah," and things like this. Somebody once said to me, "I don't get Shakespeare. What's the whole Shakespeare thing?" And I said, "Well, first of all, there's no reason you have to read Shakespeare. No one's saying you've gotta. But they always say, and I understand what they mean, but if I don't read Shakespeare, then I'm a loser."
Yeah.
Everyone says he's the best. How come I'm not connecting? And so I often say, well, let's sit down and read a sonnet together. Most of the time, that knocks them so far out, they go, wow, I didn't know that was going on. You know, sometimes, most of the time.
Do you feel that, and I love your chapter on the digital age.
Yes.
And how much, our modern technology has really created a platform
Yeah.
for the love of poetry and the understanding of poetry. And of course, these new genres, I mean, of course, spoken word. Do you feel there's been a kind of a mushrooming movement with a generation toward poetry?
I think it's in its third generation. Rap and hip hop got started in 1977, right? And so that means if you think about it, it's already been around for 50 years, and it means that not only are kids more into certain kinds of spoken word poetry, but their teachers grew up with it too, because it's two generations. People who were who were 10 or 12 when the first rap and hip hop songs started making the airwaves, and suddenly this explosion of new energy, and it did a lot of favors for a lot of people, because actually I think that the objection that we used to hear a lot, you and I did, of, well, my teachers ruined poetry for me. It's much less common now.
Yeah.
People under 40, you're not going to hear it very much. Why? Because they and their friends went around talking poetry, having contests,
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. If I'm reflecting on that conversation when somebody says, if it's somebody, let's say, 45 and under, I get a much different response. Hey, that's cool. What kind of and they're asking me, what kind of poetry? And there's more of a kind of feeling me out on where it is, as opposed to, kind of my generation will say, yeah, Charles, I never got poetry.
I think I really do believe what you're saying is true. I actually think there has been, I don't call it a divide. I mean, it's a development of a new art form that we have. And I'm not saying that all rap or all hip hop is good. A lot of it's not. But when it works, it's delightful. And when I was coming up, it was the revolution will not be televised. The first, often the very first attempts to make whole albums with rapped lyrics
Right.
with jazz music in the background, in the late 60s. And I heard that coming up, and I said, I'm really liking what this is doing, because of course I pay too much. My friends used to tell me, Charles, you pay too much attention to lyrics, John. I said, I can't help it. I love lyrics. So yes, I think something has changed, and it's a good thing, and it's in its third generation, and rap and hip hop are changing rapidly too. I want to see where they go, and I think also the point you make about the digital age, if I may just dwell on that for just a moment. Obviously, this is the second edition, and I had to face squarely this question of, well, what's happened in the last 26 years? Well, what happened was the poetry world got organized. It's been said that since the invention of the web in the late 80s, all of human knowledge has been reorganized 3 times. Well, I think the poetry world has been reorganized for good. I think for good reason too. First of all, as of 2000, if I wrote a poem and wanted to send it out, I typed it up, I put it in an envelope, I put it in the mail, and I might never hear anything again. There was no necessary connection. There were 1,000 points of light, but no network. Now we have a network. Now we have poets who can be part of a virtual community, and there's a lot of support. And what I really like about Substack is that if you get a poem published, people will write you about it and talk about it,
Right.
and talk about craft,
Well,
So-
our time is moving along, and we talk about poetry, but we also like to hear poetry on this program. So I'm going to turn the show over to you, and you can
dangerous.
you can share your poetry or whatever poems you want to read,
Okay.
and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Charles. It's. I didn't know we were going to do this. I should have paid attention, but I will. I've got some things I could share, and then I'd like to read some of the things that are in the book,
Great.
because they delight me, and they're not me; they're other people. But first, I'll start with something that I just published in the Sonneteer, which is this delightful all sonnets website. And this is called Weathered Mahogany. Tell me, you said, the color of your soul these days. I'll try. The porch has gotten gray, though it may have a decorative charm, trampled and cracked. It is, like I am, old, but freshly sawn. The planks were burgundy of air-drunk lungs, warm browns. A thunderstorm now darkens, but in prologues of green lace, the tendril of an everlasting pea achieves a crack and works the seam. It finds, unflinching, coils and, climbing without choice, chooses a way with seeing finger, eye that feels, resignifying rain and winds. Its blossoms, pink and white, disarm the scene, transforming storm, rough porch, old soul, and man. There's an example of a poem that started to be about one thing and got taken over completely in the middle of it, which is great. And when that happens, you have the decision as the poet of, shall I let it take over? And I thought to myself, well, it's a lot better than what I had. So, the next thing I would like to read is something that was published in Per Contra, which was a Drexel-affiliated. I don't know if it's still around. I know that it still exists online. A Drexel-affiliated journal. This is called Assemblage. Assemblage is a word that is on the list of the 200 most beautiful words in English. There's all these silly words these lists that people publish, and assemblage gets on it, and it is a beautiful word. Assemblage. That j at the end is just gorgeous. So it's got me thinking about how complicated machines are put together, and that hit onto how complicated selves are put together, that we're all assemblages. Assemblage. Though Orville flew first, Wilbur flew the best at Kitty Hawk. By Orville's hand, the flyer stayed up long enough to say it flew, but Wilbur was first pilot, hauling on or off hip cradle, elevator, pulleys, airborne cussedness. The halting, warping, triple-axis thing fought through the air, and Wilbur strained to hold it together, balance entities in different parts rigged differently, bewilderments of truss, crisscrossing in cat's-cradled webworks. Independent parts, declaring independence, Wilbur orchestrated. Nose pitched up and down, he slid his hips to roll the plane. Behind, contrariwise propellers shrieking 10 feet off the earth, 850 feet, a minute less a second, crashed. My myth, my lullaby is, I'm the same I every time. Me, known address, certificate of occupancy. I'm also the one who lies amid the fuming, deafening motors, rotating selves that screw me through the air against the surd of midnight. Struts crack, guy wires sing with stress, my fabric shreds in loud white sheer. That's what flight is. Or riding, like the time I saw this circus acrobat, she rode a 3-horse team while standing, knees bent, smiles like cards dealt to the crowd. Control is part relinquishment, accounting for the lurches, bucks, excesses, here poised by assertions there to smooth the seam of mastery. Who's that? They asked in the crowd. Who wasn't she? She went by many names. The crowd had seen incomparable Giselle time and again tonight, shot out of cannons, trampolined. They'd gasped at the pretty ankles Armando grasped on trapeze, her head in George the Bear's mouth, unicycling on a wire. She, who, each time. Today, she drove the tent stake driver, strained with clowns, trombonists, and cooks to haul the big top up. Past midnight tonight, she'll lead the horses to the truck. A signal, engines rev, police lights whirlwind, sluggish train uncoils, pays down the road. The turnpike's closed to let them caravan the gruntled towns of Jersey. Circus rouge and costumes let the cloud pretend they don't know what they know best. The big top logic of their lives. Incomparable Giselle was Eva May an hour ago. Her whip barked, stallions strode like men. Then lovely Jacqueline, thrown through the smoky air, or throwing. Loopy-Doo the clown, bunged in a barrel, set on fire, her teardrop eyes. The crowd applauds for each bows, and at the final grand parade, a nameless woman, one name, all names, gets her moments raw. The self an act of jugglery where no sword leaves the hand, yet all flash to the vision. Rolls and rolls, some kindred, some next-door neighbors who never speak, some enemies, and she negotiates, she integrates, she tacitly assents to I and thou as necessary shuffle. She applauds good dealers and good deals. She savors multiplicity. Word of her moment, Jacqueline, Giselle, and Loopy-Doo all in one woman, ease astride a team, whose steeds appear or disappear as she rides round the ring, a changing charge of 3, or is it 1, or none, or 4. She, still astride and riding righteous, rider and the ride. She rides as right as Wilbur Wright, who held together cranky herds of kites against their will and earthy downward long enough to fly. And I would love to just give a taste of some of the older poetry in the book, because for me, the newer poetry is absolutely, there are poems that I wanted to have in this book that I couldn't have for legal and rights purposes, but some of the poems being written today are some of the most enthralling pieces of verbal art I've ever come across. If you get a chance to read Lake Loop by Natalie Diaz sometime. It is simply amazing, and there is an animation of it on YouTube. Lake Loop, look it up, and you get to see the entire poem made into this animated piece of art. It's so beautiful. So that leads me to say, well, let's read something from 2,600 years ago. This is from Sappho. I'm trying to write a book about Sappho, and Sappho is this kind of poet. We have about 7 complete poems of hers, plus a couple of hundred more lines in fragments, and they're delectable. And okay, I'm going to say something that's going to sound bad, but I know a little Greek, so I can sit down with a dictionary and actually make my way through Sappho. And the moment I realized I could do that was a big turning point for me, that I could actually see her art. So this is the very first poem in the Library of Alexandria's scroll of Sappho. And it is addressed to Aphrodite, and it's asking Aphrodite to come down, as evidently she has done several times already, to help Sappho achieve the love of someone who is spurning her at the moment. And it begins with this astonishing description of how Aphrodite comes down to earth. But once she gets there, the language really changes. This is really, it's quite humorous in some ways. Rainbow-throned, deathless Aphrodite, wile-weaving Zeus' daughter, I pray, don't overwhelm with anguish and grief, mistress, my heart, but come here, if ever, if any time, you from far away heard my voice and left your father's golden house in your yoked chariot. Lovely, swift sparrows, spinning with whirring wings, carried you above this dark earth, down from the sky, mid-air, and soon got here. You, blessed, smile on your deathless face, asked, what is the matter with you this time? Why are you calling this time? What in your craziest of hearts do you want this time? Who am I supposed to sweet talk into taking you back this time? Who wrongs you, Sappho? She runs from you? Soon she'll chase you. She spurns your gifts? Well, instead she'll give them. She doesn't love. Oh, yes, she will, be she never so unwilling. Come to me and now. Free me from these griefs of longing. All my heart longs after, make it happen. And you yourself, be my battle mate. There, she has got it going on. I am serious. But speaking of someone who has it going on, Rumi, the great Persian poet who's now one of the most famous poets in the world, and it all started, well, in the mid-19th century when people started, German poets started trying to write ghazals, right? And a ghazal is this wonderful, repeating, sort of chain-like verse form. And in this poem, you will hear it come back again. You found me again is the sort of the repeated part, the repetend. In Persian, it's called the radif. So these don't have titles, but this is Rumi, and what Rumi is famous for is the beloved with a capital B. It's a metaphor that is the person that I'm in love with. It's the concept of love itself, being a beloved and having a beloved, and what that does to you, how it transforms you. And then it's also the deity itself, so that when we have the beloved, we also are at one with the deity. And the deity is constantly seeking us, constantly trying to overturn our apple cart, trying to get at us, trying to get us to see things differently, because that's the role of a lover. You found me once again, you thief of hearts. In drunken ecstasy, you searched the bazaar and found me. Even though sleepy-lidded, love-drunk eyes, you spotted me. I ran to the tavern, you found me. Why do I run when no one can escape you? Why hide when you found me 100 times? I thought I could lose you in a crowd of people. But you find me, even in crowds of secrets, even behind my own masks. What a blessing to be sought and found by your eyes. What luck to be caught in your twists and turns. Loving seer, persistent seer, towering cypress of countless gardens. I was pulling a thorn from my foot when you found me. You showered me with flowers from your fertile beds. Dear nightingale, your melodies open my ears. Like a ladle wanting its fill of light, I plunged into the moon's halo. At the bottom of that bottomless pot, you found me. Like a deer fleeing a lion, I ran through the desert. Deep in the mountains, you found me. Wounded, I shed my blood on every path. You followed the drops and found me. I was a hooked fish writhing in the waves. At the end of the line, you found me. You roam the skies and catch galloping deer. With all that skill and patience, you found me. The moment you found me, you gave me a cup brimming with love's wine, heavy enough to match the weight on my soul. Every sip lightened it, every sip a balm. I drank till empty. My soul took flight. I have no mind, no ear, no tongue today. The source of thought and word found me. Mm. And you know, he sounds almost modern.
I was just, you took the words out of my mouth. I think if you didn't mention date him.
Yes.
And say he was from Persia.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
People would say, no, that sounds too modern. This sounds like the poetry, that we're used to.
The images, the metaphorical density, the irony, the sense of humor, the clash of different sensibilities in those poems. I mean, he anticipates so much, and it's you don't have to be religious, you don't have to be anything to read this poetry. It's sort of like reading Whitman in a sense, because there's this opening of the self. There's this just joy of having a wider experience. And you'll notice too, the other thing that he's doing, and tell me when we're getting close. The other thing that he's doing is he's mixing up the deity and the beloved. Right. Who is the you? And evidently the you is in you. You find me all the time. You're a real person. And the finding of me, that sense of someone else knowing me intimately, is so, well, that's modern too. That's, anyway.
We have about 5 minutes left.
Okay.
So if you can.
Sure. I would love to read. There's so many good ones. So I'll tell you what I'll do. All right. Here's an old one. Western wind, when wilt thou blow? The small rain down can rain. Christ, that my love were in my arms and I in my bed again. And that's 4 anonymous lines that are written in the margins of a manuscript, and we don't know where they come from, and we don't know who wrote it. And it's thought that they were the refrain of a popular song that was going around at the time, but we'll never know. Mm. And it is ineffable. It's simply gorgeous. This is The Business by Robert Creeley, one of the strangest love poems ever written, but I just love it. To be in love is like going outside to see what kind of day it is. Do not mistake me. If you love her, how prove she loves also, except that it occurs, a remote chance on which you stake yourself. But barter for the Indian was a means of sustenance. And he did that to us on purpose. He sends us that he sends us a curveball at the end. All right, and do we have time for one more?
Yep, a short one. Yeah.
Okay.
Excuse me.
One Art by Elizabeth Bishop.
Uh-huh.
And
love Elizabeth.
Yeah, there's a movie in which none other than Cameron Diaz reads this aloud to a man in a a hospital bed. It's a movie set right here in Philly. Look it up, folks.
Huh, I think I saw the movie.
The art of losing isn't hard to master. So many things seem filled with the intent to be lost that their loss is no disaster. Lose something every day, except the fluster of lost door keys, the hour badly spent. The art of losing isn't hard to master. Then practice losing farther, losing faster, places and names and where it was you meant to travel. None of these will bring disaster. I lost my mother's watch, and look, my last or next to last of 3 loved houses went. The art of losing isn't hard to master. I lost 2 cities, lovely ones, and vaster. Some realms I owned, 2 rivers, a continent. I miss them, but it wasn't a disaster. Even losing you, the joking voice, a gesture I love, I shan't have lied. It's evident the art of losing is not too hard to master, though it may look like, write it, like disaster.
That's fabulous. And it's been fabulous having you as my guest on this edition
Fabulous to be here.
Philly
Lots of
Loves
fun.
Poetry. And we could spend another show going through this, but this, to our audience, this is a very worthwhile investment, for you and, for your family. I mean, we buy all kinds of books, but this one, I think, you can really savor. It's so well written, and it's so well organized. You can start anywhere in the book and get a great deal of enjoyment. So, thank you.
Thank you, Charles. That's so kind of you.
For the gift. And I want to thank, Warren Longmire, who's been our production coordinator this time. Warren is himself a fabulous
Sure
artist and poet. And for him to come in and kind of take over and help us make this show happen, I'm very, very appreciative. The other thing, I can't ever leave these shows without acknowledging what is the source that makes this program happen, and it's the Moonstone Arts Center. Yeah. And it's not one man, but one man who has been the drum major of poetry in the city of Philadelphia for a very long time, and that's Larry Robin. Mm-hmm. I in the beginning I used the word treasure. Well, Larry is truly a cultural treasure, and Moonstone Arts Center is a treasure many people don't know about, but we have readings just about every Wednesday night at Fergie's Pub. We publish books. I'm sure we're well over 200, maybe working on 300 books. And that's only in the space maybe of 10 years that this has all happened. It's what this man does and what this organization does for art and the art of poetry in the city is absolutely astounding. So if you can find a way to go on our website, find a way you can support us, because we need our support. We need that support. And this is a real gift, this program. Not me, but just the whole idea is something that Larry helped to create and Moonstone Arts said. So this has given me a wonderful platform. Every month I get to meet these extraordinary poets and artists, and it's a tremendous gift. So support Moonstone Arts Center. It's a fabulous place. And support PhillyCam because they need your support too. This is essentially a nonprofit organization. And the stuff that you can go on PhillyCam and public access and see, it's really astounding. So once again, thank you for tuning in. I'll see you again next month, and we'll have another poet.
Thank you so much for having me on,
Oh,
Charles.
well, I'm glad I finally could, get you down here.
Yeah. And thanks for the books, and I definitely will flip you a copy.
Gentlemen, that was fabulous.
Thanks, Warren.
Well, thank you, Warren. We owe you a debt of